the Twitch offices.
Yeah.
Very known also from being part of the Forbes 30 under 30 list. He hacked many things, I guess. I think we wouldn't use himself also.
That's the name of the talk.
A lot of video games. And I'm very, very looking forward to your talk. Yeah. And I'm so glad you made it to Graz. Just in time. And let's welcome Thomas.
I'm so excited to be here. The level's good, right? You can hear me? Yes. Good. Okay. Where was I going to start? Oh, I want to start by just saying this is so beautiful here. I've never been in Austria before, and it's so Austrian. It's amazing. I feel like I walk out the hotel and I can't decide whether I'm going to be a vampire or write a symphony orchestra that day. It's just yeah. So I'm going to do a show of hands because I've never done that before, and I'm very excited to do it. So who here, like, let's talk about security first of all. Who here knows what XSS or cross-site scripting is? Can somebody put their hands up if they know what that is? Oh, that's good, that's good. And the other one thing I wanted to ask about was, who knows what OpenID is? Does anyone know what OpenID is? Oh, some people. I like you people. And then the last thing is, whose iPhone password starts with the number 1? Anyone? Ooh, okay. Yeah. You've just reduced your security by, what is it, 9 choose 1? A factor of 9. Anyway, yeah, I wondered if you could really just genuinely ask anything. Apparently you can. So welcome to my talk. It's called I Hacked Video Games like 300 times and all I got was a stupid talk. It's up on the screen, in case you didn't know. So I work in the security industry. I work at Twitch. There's a slide where I'll go over that, but I got into the games industry by actually hacking things in and around games, and I've done that for a very long time, and it's what makes me get out of bed in the morning every day. So I've done a lot of that, and I wanted to like distill the things that I've learned into something that would be consumable by people who aren't explicitly technical, like people who are, you know, dyed-in-the-wool software engineers or security engineers or so on. And I wrote this title not really quite knowing how I was going to present it, and I've split it up. Let's see. Do I have one of those wands that changes the thing, or do I have a slide wand? Yeah, sure. I'm just going for the whole professional thing here. I feel so smart being in like a university. I never actually went to university. I applied for medical school and they rejected me because I wasn't very smart. Okay. Great. Okay. Oh, great. I've even got slides. So I've got some things I want to cover. I'm going to talk about what vulnerabilities are. There's this idea people throw around of hacking all the time, and like, you know, there's someone in a ski mask or a black hoodie, and they like type on the keyboard really fast, and you get into a system. But I want to talk about like more concretely what a vulnerability is, how it occurs, just a like high-level theory that allows me every day to think about the functionality of securities of systems. Then we're going to talk about like ways vulnerabilities occur in the sense that like I have 2 examples that are just sort of interesting examples that I think everybody will enjoy about ways that I've like broken video game systems in interesting ways that might make you learn something, hopefully. And then lastly, I'm just going to like have a slide and I'm going to talk about like some good ways to prevent yourself being hacked, having vulnerabilities in your systems. And then hopefully Q&A. I don't know whether Q&A is illegal in this country, but that's what I want to do at the end, because I'm not going to cover everything. I've put way too much content in this, and I'm talking relatively slowly. Let's see if I can get through everything. Okay, so the first thing is my partial introduction already. I work at Twitch. My name is Thomas Shadwell. I have this handle online, which is Zemnes, and I'm sorry, it's like impossible to spell and impossible to say. But if you get halfway there, then you could just like flip it and do the rest of it, because it's a palindrome. It's the same forwards and backwards. The backstory is like when I was 16 and I signed up for Steam, I was like, all right, I'm going to do everything anew. I've had all these stupid names in the past, and I come up with a name, I'm going to stick with it forever. And at the time, everyone was picking names like Dark Angel 99 and like I Love Rabbits 23. And 16-year-old me, I don't know how I had this like relatively smart idea, was like, well, what happens in 10 years when I don't like rabbits anymore? So I got to pick a name that's just fundamentally meaningless, which is why it's essentially just a jumble of numbers. Ooh, sorry. So let's see, I work at Twitch, which you probably already know, that's been mentioned. We do video on the internet and video games. People can write things next to the video game. I also work for the UK National Cyber Security Centre as part of the Industry 100 program. I hacked the UK tax system last year, and the government said, wow, do you want to help us maybe not have that happen in the future? And I said, okay. So now I'm like I work part-time for them, and I can't really tell you anything else about it. I have every possible weakness, and I don't actually wear glasses. That's like a really interesting thing. Is there a laser that I can use? That'd be really great. I got a laser. Oh my god. I feel like I'm in one of those films where there's a university. This is me, and like as you notice, I don't actually wear these glasses. So the backstory behind this is I was so surprised when I got put on the Forbes list, and I don't have any professional headshots of any kind. So I looked through my thing, and the most professional picture I had, this one, was actually me in a glasses shop trying on glasses that I didn't own. It was like a really expensive one too. So we photoshopped out the label, which was just here, that said how expensive the glasses were, and I sent that into Forbes. And I just love how like I look so like I look like I know something, but really I don't. Anyway, that's my headshot forever. This is just a slide, because the talk is called I hacked a lot of things, or whatever the talk's called, so I had to have a slide where I listed some of the things. It didn't really fit on the slide, but you get it, I've hacked a couple of things in the past. So, the first thing I want to talk about, and this is like the thing that I mentioned at the beginning, is I want to talk about like what a vulnerability is. And I'm going to start by talking about this concept of attack surface, which is this idea that when you build a piece of software, when you build a system, that system has an edge. Do I have it? Oh yeah. It's like a hamburger, okay? So like with the attack surface, you have like lots of layers, and you have to sort of eat your way to the bottom where the best thing is. I guess the whole hamburger metaphor breaks down because the bread is only as good as the bread at the top. But like you usually have a diagram like this where it's like, oh yeah, so you can attack humans, and then the humans can attack you. Once you attack the humans, you can get to the network and the system, right? It comes from this very conventional information security idea where you have like a firewall, and then you have your systems behind a firewall, and then you have like all the secret data, like your names and addresses and everything behind that. So I have a different idea. Here's a better version of the diagram that I've come up with. It's called the attack space, and that's something I completely just made up. Oh, I forgot about this slide. So like, yeah, I mean, the slide is what it is. There's a rainbow, which is the attack path, and there's like good stuff at the bottom, because the bread is just not very good metaphor. So I came up with this idea called the attack space, and I looked this up just to see if anybody else had used it. Apparently not. There's a film called Attack from Space, but there's no attack space. And I use this metaphor all the time, so I've decided to come up with a word for it whenever I explain like how vulnerabilities occur. Like, think about it like this. Nobody goes into work and thinks, I'm going to write a security vulnerability today. I'm going to make it so that if somebody does something really weird, they get access to everything that we have control over, right? There is this difference between what people believe the system does when they write something and what the system actually does. And in that space is all computer bugs and also computer vulnerabilities. And this is another diagram that I draw sometimes, and just to talk about like how complex computers are. Because like, I would ask myself, why do vulnerabilities exist in the first place? Like, when you print Hello World to a screen, that's an app on your computer, and then you have like the window manager for the computer, which makes the windows draw, and then the operating system, the kernel bus, everything like that. There's levels of abstraction and all sorts of things that are hidden to you. And that's what programming is all about, right? Like, you don't have to type assembly that gets piped straight into like a circuit that turns lights on and off anymore, whatever they did during World War II in order to make computers work, right? You can write an app in like a line of code now, and that inherently means that you don't fundamentally know exactly what's going on. What's my next slide? Oh, yeah, so I came up with this like more in-depth example by what I mean when I say that things at different layers of the stack, they have different meaning, and they have different inherent properties that you might not know when you're dealing with them. So like, this is, for example, an example web app where you're redirecting to a particular destination. And it's completely contrived, although you might do this quite a lot of the time. And it's not just a single line of code. Just imagine there's more code, but it doesn't fit in space. Like, PHP itself has vulnerabilities and issues that you don't think about when you're dealing with redirects. Like, there was this pattern way back in the day where people use this function called extract within PHP. So, sorry, take away, don't write PHP. But they wrote this function, they used a function called extract, where you could take variables and it would just load them directly into PHP's memory. And it was really common for people to just like extract $_get, which is everything that the user sends you. And as a result, the user can just override anything in PHP's memory, like the admin password or anything else. Anyway, that's an example of an attack on PHP. Then there's this CLRF, I think that's how you call it, like new line carriage return. In the HTTP protocol, you have different lines of text and they're all on their own line. And when you do a location redirect, it's like location, colon, and then some location. And if somebody manages to like shoehorn a new line to carriage return into there, you end up actually going onto a different line, and then they can type anything they want. They can change what the server identifies itself as, all sorts of terrible things. Typical XSS and everything else. I'm just trying to illustrate like the complexities of abuse and how vulnerabilities occur. And I've ruined the diagram as well, just to be doubly sure that you understand that. It's like all the bugs are here, but only some of these bugs are going to be vulnerabilities, and you sort of have to like work your way around like through this path in order to get there. So I've come up with this new idea called the security arena. It's a completely different paradigm on security. There's 2 teams, there's 6 players, there's 2 ancients, and okay, this is just Dota, but the metaphor that I'm just trying to make is that like you can't think about security explicitly in terms of boundaries and the boundaries and protecting those individual boundaries, because everything is intermingled and everything talks to everything. And a really classic example of this is thinking about the way web browsers work within the context of network security. Like it's really common for me to talk to security engineers even who are like, our thing is really secure. We have the office network, everything's secrets in the office network, and if you're not in the office, you can't access that network. And you know, it's all going to be like some website that you can go on in order to read somebody's payment information. And the thing about that is, well, if it's a website, then you can access it through the web, which means a web browser. So every single employee who's sitting in that office is now a way to get into the network. I can send a website to them, that website can say, hey, make a request to the internal service that returns people's address, and then I have people's address. It's amazing and terrifying. I want to talk about one last thing when it comes to information security theory in general, and that's this idea of threat modeling. And to me, threat modeling is like the core of information security understanding, right? Like a good information security engineer should be able to take a list of 100 terrifying things. Like information security you can imagine as like managing skeletons in closets. You know, people like talk about opening a closet and having a skeleton there. You have so many skeletons, you have so many closets, and there are people running around with their hair on fire going, oh my god, what are we going to do about all the skeletons in closets? And you say, all right, don't worry about this, I'm going to threat model it, and you come up with like the top 100 skeletons in closets that you need to fix by the next quarter. So that's the general idea with threat modeling. It is something that wraps up, that takes whatever project, whatever system you have, and gives you a list of things that you need to deal with. If there's anything that you take away from this talk, it's just that if you build a system, you should have a threat model of that system. Even if you're not like the best security engineer in the world, or even not a security engineer, having that understanding of what you need to protect and how you need to protect it is really important. I'm talking fast because I'm not sure how much time I have. So, how to threat model? So the threat model is in itself an understanding of the system, the understanding of the threats against the system, and the understanding of how those threats will try and get into the system. So you build a flow chart of your whole system, and then you think about like, what are the top 100 things I'm most worried about? Am I worried, like if it's a video game, am I worried about someone pretending to be someone else in the video game? Or am I worried about somebody stealing our payment information or our usernames and passwords and so on? And you look at your flow diagram that talks about all the services and how they talk to other services, and you think, how does someone get into this system? And what kind of motives do they have to get into the system? Is it money? Is it fame? Is it something else? And then when you have your list of all sorts of the different things that you're worried about, and you work out how likely they are and how much monetary impact they're going to have on you, then you can calculate which of the things are most important. All right, so almost done with the boring part. There's a thing called stride, and it's actually, there aren't 2 Ds in stride, but when I was writing this slide, I realized that one of the things in stride, which is an acronym, is information disclosure, and I feel like it's very rude that they didn't put the second D in there, so I put the second D in there. And stride is a mnemonic for remembering certain things in threat modeling. With everything in threat modeling, you build your flowchart and you ask, how does somebody compromise this? And stride is just a list of ways that things can be compromised. So I'll just go through them quickly. A system can have the user identity spoof. They could pretend to be someone else. That's obviously terrible. There's tampering, which is where, often you'll build a chat system, you can encrypt that chat system. You might not be able to change or know what the things are that people are sending, but you can potentially reorder them anyway and, prevent things being sent or not being sent. That comes under tampering. And then we have repudiation, which is amazing to me, because repudiation just means checking if something's real. But obviously they wanted to make it spell a word, so they use this ridiculous word that I don't think I ever used until I read what stride was. And that's if you have two people playing on a game server, it's like an MMO or something else, you want to be able to determine, if someone's saying, hi, I'm John, and I've just walked 10 meters, or I've just shot myself, then you need to be able to determine if that's really John saying it, or if that's somebody saying that they are John. It's very important to be able to determine who is saying which things. Information disclosure, which is leaking information. It's one that's often sort of downplayed because just information disclosure doesn't sound that cool, I guess. But you have to really think, what is the information that you hold worth to somebody? If you're building a video game, if somebody gets an IP address, they can potentially know where somebody lives, and that's probably a bad thing. And also, they can use it to knock them off the internet by denial of servicing them. Think about what your information is and how it's useful to you. Escalation privilege, this is a very common one. Somebody has some level of privilege, right? They might be an operator on a server of some kind. And then they use some vulnerability to be able to turn them from an operator into an admin. It's very common for those checks, those authorization checks, to have some failure of logic. All right, so let's go into the fun stuff. I'm going to talk about two different vulnerabilities. Do I have a timer that says how much time I'm using, or do I just keep talking until somebody says stop? You'll just tell me.
You have enough time to.
Okay, I can't read that. It doesn't have any numbers on it. I didn't go to university, guys. So this one is, I'm going to talk about two different kinds of vulnerability on the stride list. I originally was going to talk about 5, and then I realized, oh my god, we're finite beings, and we live in the space-time continuum. We can't just fit everything into 50 minutes. So this one is spoofing user identity, and this is a vulnerability I found on the Steam translation service. The Steam translation service is something that allows people to be able to edit, change, and work on the translations for all of their video games, all of their websites, and everything like that. And it's a really interesting target for me because usually in translation services like this, you can actually send raw HTML straight to the website, or you can send raw game code straight to the game, which means compromising a translation service means compromising every single person who's using the game and every single person who's on the website, which is obviously kind of a bad thing. So I was looking at this, and there's something that, oh my goodness, I was going to say you wouldn't notice it, but this text is actually huge, so you might even notice it. There was a split second of it being redirected through another page, and I noticed that, and I thought, wow, that's kind of interesting. And here's what it is, the URL that they pass through in order to start the actual authorization through OpenID has examples in it, as well as the OpenID thing. So when they created this OpenID system, they literally just copied and pasted the examples straight into a folder and then edited it, which isn't of itself a security vulnerability, but something that was deeply interesting to me. So I then Googled the examples and the name of the file, and I ended up with the raw source code, which, as you can see, is the standard PHP OpenID library, which should be secure. But I wasn't thinking like that because I was too excited and I didn't even notice this. I just read through all the code. I found this issue. You might be able to see it here. They have some, I didn't have any idea about how OpenID worked at the time. OpenID is a protocol that Steam Translation Service uses to call out to Steam and say, who is this person? What authorization do they have on my website? I'll explain that later. But what I was explicitly interested in is this function called trust. Get trust root, and the thing that trusts is $_server_name. Now, here's an interesting tidbit. $_server_name is completely user provided. You can just tell it what the server name is. And now, normally, this will be whatever you access the website from. So this would be something like https steamtranslationservice.com, right? But, and that, forms part of the protocol I'll explain later, but I can send anything I want. I could send bobsgreathats.com, and the system's going to go, oh, I guess I'm bobsgreathats.com. So I actually started reading about OpenID. It's amazing. OpenID is such an old protocol, and just the way people talked about protocols back then is great. And I love this whole security thing where there's where there's the user is a keyhole for some reason. I still don't understand why that is. This diagram makes no sense to me, and I know exactly how OAuth works. And there was this thing called Yadis, and I'm not really sure how Yadis works still, but the fundamental thing is when you read all the implementations, all they do is they like copy and paste the URL and then load it, because nobody, I think, actually understands what this means. And then there's the word disco, and I put disco ball in. That's the joke for this slide, sorry. This slide is just meant to show how long the OpenID authentication protocol, the OpenID, yes, okay. So here's a confusing thing. There's another protocol called OpenID Connect, which is a new one, and it's great, but all OpenID is kind of bad. And it also uses all these amazing words that I don't understand. I just remember, like, it's such a horrible protocol to read and implement. So here's my overhead diagram of how OpenID and the OpenID system works. The Steam translation service says to my browser, they say, can you get Steam to identify you, please? The browser then goes to Steam and says, please identify me, Steam. Steam then comes back with a thing saying the user is identified as that's my Steam account, signed Steam. The browser then sends that back to the Steam translation service with the signature from Steam. They pass it back to Steam, they say, did you really sign this? Is this the real user? And then they say, yeah, sure. And that's how you get into it. So I was thinking about this and the whole host manipulation thing. If I go back a couple of slides, if I do this correctly, this get trust root thing, this is actually what the server identifies itself as. So on this diagram, this bit, I have actually an extra bit, I should probably write here. It actually doesn't just say the user is identified as something, but it also says the user is identified as this and the target is the Steam translation service. Because the important thing about, if you think about it, I'm going to explain this slide later. You have Steam and you have multiple different peers that connect to Steam via OpenID, and all of them want to be able to have sign-on, all of them want to be able to know your identity, but you also don't want all of them to like be able to, say for example, I send my identity to tf2hats.com, right? I don't want tf2hats.com to be able to send my identity to videogamegambling.com that I just sent to them, and then log in as me. That's obviously a terrible thing. But through the power of the get trust root being set like this, I can get the server to believe it itself is whatever I want, because I can set this server_server name variable. So here is the CVE that I filed. And I actually have it written down on my slide notes, but my slide notes are not showing. It doesn't matter because it's really boring anyway. The idea is that you send your OpenID stuff to some evil place. And that could be, obviously it's not going to say like, I'm an evil website, please enter your credentials. It's going to be like, please log into Steam so we can give you a free item. And then at that point, the evil one is able to send it to a good system, like, I don't know, videogamegambling.com. And it can send the OpenID that was originally destined for the evil website, but send it with the host header that I mentioned before, evil.oid.com. So then the good server's like, what's my trust root? Who am I called? Oh, I guess I'm called the evil server. And then when it validates the whole OAuth thing that gets sent to it that describes who the person is, it just accepts the evil website's OAuth thing. Anyway, that's super boring, and actually, this isn't the vulnerability I want to talk about. So I kept thinking about this, right? And I was looking at this URL, and one of the interesting things is they provide an OpenID identifier, and you see it's like steamcommunity.com/OpenID. So that's like they've specified in the URL that they've sent what the actual place is that they go to find the user's identity. And the thing is, like, OpenID comes from way back in the day where it wasn't like, oh, I want to sign in with Facebook on Tinder or something, right? It was like, I want to be able to sign into Tinder using any identity on the internet. Because the idea was this like whole decentralized thing people were really excited about. So you can actually, with classical OpenID systems, you can send nearly any valid OpenID server. And this is a classical OpenID system, or at least it appears to be as far as this URL is concerned. So here was my thinking, right? If I change the OpenID server that the system is connecting to from Steam to one that I've written, and the one that I've written is just like, yeah, whatever they are, who they say they are, to every single request, then I can just send it, I can construct a request that goes to the Steam translation service that says, hi, this is a certification that I am Gabe Newell of valvesoftware.com, and then it'll go over to my service, and the service will just say, sure, whatever, they are who they say they are. I've written this out in a diagram because I know that words are not as good as diagrams. I don't know if I actually want to read all of this, but essentially the high-level idea is Yeah, the high-level idea is that I just send, when they receive the authorization, so you go from Steam Translation Service to Steam, right? And then when Steam goes back to Steam Translation Service and says, here you go, here's the authorization for Thomas. I'm sorry, I've lost my train of thought. Sorry. So when the service, that is Steam, sends back the thing and says, yes, they really are Thomas, I can change that ends up going back to this, that ends up on an endpoint on Steam Translation Service. And I can also send requests to that endpoint. In fact, I can send requests to that endpoint that don't just say Steam, I can send requests to that endpoint that come from my server. And that ends up being this thing. And this is like my favorite thing about being in information security is like looking at this and going, wow, I have no idea what that means. Because like it's so big and it just doesn't mean anything. The thing that you see in the middle here is that my service, shelteredinlet.heroku.app.com, which would normally be the Steam service, but is now mine. And it also probably has my login here somewhere. There it is. That's the Steam ID that I'm trying to impersonate. So I had a really good image of actually compromising this and getting access to everything, but I accidentally left it back in the UK, along with a lot of my slides, sadly, which is why I had to construct them. So let's talk about impact. If it hasn't been made clear, I got complete control over the Steam Translation Service. I could be anybody I want, I could do anything I want, and as a result, I had total control over Steam as far as, what Steam said, what the code that Steam sent to you, and also a considerable number of their games, I believe, but that wasn't something I tested. The thing that I did was, I haven't told anybody that before. In fact, I've never discussed any of these vulnerabilities before. I signed Gabe Newell up as a Romanian translator. If you don't know, Gabe Newell is the founder of Valve/Steam. I don't really know how that works, but I put his Steam ID in. Then I said, I want to be a Romanian translator, so here's a fact that nobody knows. Gabe Newell is a Romanian translator now. Let's talk about the next type of vulnerability, which is information disclosure. And it's so good that the screen is large so you can see what's on it, because when I practice this, I just have it on a tiny little laptop monitor. So you can probably see what the issue is already, the weird thing. This is google.com, and it's rendering in the game PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds. So here's a little tidbit. PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds is a web browser. And I'm sure very few people have played that game, which is one of the biggest games in the world at the moment, is actually a web browser. In fact, the UI that it's built on is actually a web page, and they've removed it now, so I can't show it to you. But you used to just be able to go to the web page that they used for their UI, and then it would look like PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, which was great, and it was absolutely hilarious, and I showed all my friends. But here's the thing. So like, I was playing some video games with some friends, as you do. I don't know, I was going to make a gaming joke, but I couldn't think of any of that. And I noticed somebody on a really bad connection. I don't know what the equivalent in this country is, but like, I think they were on Verizon. And when you can't load something on Verizon, it shows you a web page that says, sorry, we couldn't load this thing. I'm really, really sorry. Do you want to search this thing on Google with our affiliate code so we get money from it? And that's like a classic man in the middle thing, right? You've tried to load something on the internet and they've replaced it with something else. So they were trying to go on PUBG, and PUBG had some issue in their backend system somewhere. So instead of seeing the PUBG UI, they saw Verizon. And the Verizon thing was like, hey, it looks like you were trying to load the PUBG UI. You want to search something on Google? So like, I had some thoughts going on in my head, right? Like, if Verizon can man in the middle of PUBG interface, why can't I man in the middle of PUBG interface? And like, I could put anything I want in there. This wasn't even a security thing that I was thinking about at the time. I was just like, wouldn't it be cool if I could put whatever I wanted in the PUBG interface on my computer? So I wrote this little server, and essentially when my computer tries to ask for the PUBG interface, instead of giving the PUBG interface, my server loads the resource that it's asking for on the PUBG interface website, then stores it on the computer, and then shows it. So ultimately it looks the same to the video game completely, but I also have a record of everything it's loaded. And then my next step was, well, I want to see what's inside the interface. So I injected Firebug. Does anyone remember what Firebug was? So like way back when Firefox was like the browser of choice and Chrome developer tools didn't exist, there's this thing called Firebug, which is a plugin somebody wrote that it was what everybody used to see what connections web browsers were making and stuff like that. So I had all these folders and files on my computer that described the things that PUBG was loading, and I replaced the HTML file for the UI, at least a line in it, with Firebug, which turns out it's just a JavaScript file. And then I had access to everything in memory, and I was like literally just using a website inside PUBG to see what was inside PUBG. You might notice this big red line here. That's because in memory is my Steam authorization token, also my PUBG authorization token. So that's interesting. Essentially, I can do, if I inject my own UI in PUBG, or indeed, if I inject my own UI in someone else's PUBG, then I then have complete control over their PUBG session, which means I can buy things on their behalf, can sell things on their behalf, I can open crates and generally be a nuisance who also has your payment information. You might ask, well, that's just on your computer. How do you do that to someone else? Well, in comes this idea called ARP spoofing, which is going to be one of my favorite security attack types. Because ARP spoofing literally consists of yelling down the network cable, I'm the router, I'm the router. Because that's the way ARP works, for example. In order to that's the way ARP works for some reason. When a computer wants to determine where it sends the packets to, in order to get them somewhere else on the network, the router just continually sends out packets saying, I'm the router, and it turns out anybody can send those packets. So if you send enough packets as a bad person into the network, then everybody believes you're the router, and everybody sends packets through you. And if everybody sends packets through you, you're now the Verizon person who installed Google Chrome inside PUBG, except for you're not installing Google Search inside PUBG. You're going to install something that I don't know, steals all the payment information, opens all their crates for them, and then gives you the results. Let's talk about impact, because this is something this is a vulnerability I reported and it got fixed and everything, just like the previous thing. You can do a lot of bad stuff. As I mentioned, you can make payments on other people's behalf, you can add or remove friends, you can do anything inside the actual PUBG client. Which is sort of interesting because it's only supposed to be a UI layer, and yet they decided that the UI layer should also in all authorizations be able to do these things. So I reported it, and then what actually happened was immediately PUBG went down for 8 hours. So I'm very proud of that, and I look at this graph sometimes and think, oh my god, I really do have an effect on the world. And then they didn't fix it, and then I got them to fix it again. Anyway, the learning from this conversation is it doesn't matter what asset you're delivering. Everybody knows you should send game binaries or something over HTTPS, because otherwise somebody can intercept it and replace it with a virus.exe. Although it won't be called virus, it will be called here's the game.exe. But there are other assets on your game servers, and if you don't send them over over encryption using HSTS to prevent the encryption being messed with, then you can do a lot of bad stuff too. All right, so I might have blazed through. I don't know how much time do I have left? I have 20 minutes left. Okay. Sorry. This includes Q&A. Okay. So this is my last slide, actually, my strategy slide. And I just wanted to give out some generic pointers on how you prevent bad things happening to your system. And I've been trying to think really hard and distill it into things that make sense to game developers. And here's what I think. You should have a threat model, and that threat model should be an understanding of the system and the things that you're trying to protect. If you find issues, you should fix those issues at as high level as possible. So for example, if someone is able to pretend to be someone else, don't just fix the problem someone is able to pretend to be someone else. Fix the overarching problem of somebody can send packets into the server that are just assumed to be correct, right? Solve that problem at a very high level. And then the other thing that I wanted to say, because I'm just trying to say as few things as possible because everything else is on this list, is have a security email. security@whatever your website is.com, and people like me who are just playing a video game and enjoy video games will feel really uncomfortable if they have a security vulnerability that destroys your game, and so they'll send it to you and say, please fix this thing, please. And then you can fix it, and they'll usually give quite detailed information. Okay, so question and answer time. Does anyone have any questions or any answers? Actually, I have the answers. You just have the questions. I realized I went through that super fast. I get very anxious about not getting through enough of it. But so if there's anything you want to know about things that I glossed over, go ahead.
Hi, great talk. Can you confirm that your day-to-day work is like in the movie Hackers with Angelina Jolie?
So here's the thing. I originally had a joke about movie hackers in this presentation, but I got told that people wouldn't know what that movie was. And I have to say, very sadly, it's not. I don't even know how to roller skate. And like, I did this other presentation on when I hacked the UK tax system. I severely lament the whole thing where in hacking films, they always meet up with their friends in cyberspace, and there's usually like skateboarding involved somehow, and that seems so cool, but all I do is like sit by a computer in my underwear, typing for hours and swearing, and it's just not nearly as fun. But yeah, it's not really like that, unfortunately, even though a lot of people try to make it be by dressing up like that. Anyone else have any questions about what I just said?
We take questions from Twitch as well.
Oh,
Just waiting.
okay.
From in the audience, any questions? Yeah.
So how many games do you think have these vulnerabilities? Because I guess games are not necessarily the most protected kind of software.
Yeah.
So what's your personal take on it? How many did you actually find something very easily, and how many did you not?
So anybody in security will tell you that the state of security is terrifying. I'm not really sure that if that's because everybody in our industry for some reason has anxiety disorder or whether that's because it's true. A lot of things are hackable given enough time. And there are very few things for which I've spent considerable amount of time, by which I mean 6 hours or more on, that I haven't found a vulnerability in. So everything is to some extent compromisable. However, it's all about the amount of time you put in and the amount of effort you put in. And I realize this is like a horrible reference, but every time I say this, I think about the scene from, what is it, Star Wars Episode 3, where Obi-Wan's like, there's always a bigger fish, and then there's a bigger fish that eats a smaller fish. Like, there are some, when you write your threat model, you'll realize like some people have capabilities that others don't. The average 15-year-old kid can probably access your website if you blow your entire security budget on, I don't know, porting your entire system to SE Linux. But somebody like me can sure find vulnerabilities in a lot of things, but that doesn't mean that I'm a nice person. I'm not going to do that to you guys. And a lot of people can't do the things that I do, especially on video games. So I didn't answer your question, and I'll go back and answer your question with that preface, which is almost all video games are really bad for security. Video games come from this paradigm where you take software engineers, you get them to write something that's a fun game, and then at the end of the day, you like bolt the security straight on top. And I completely forgot to say this during my threat modeling and my advice before, but this is a really important point. You can't design security after you build the system. It's like inherently built into the architecture of the system. There's all this anti-cheat stuff that you can definitely bolt on, but like ask yourself the question, do I really need to put an anti-cheat in my system, or can I make it so that almost all of the game is handled on the server, so that if somebody messes with the system, I don't have to trust the requests it's sending to us, right? Somebody can't say, another player has just moved 10 meters, because they can only say, I've moved 10 meters, or something else has moved 10 meters. The state of security in video games is really quite bad.
Hello.
Where are you? Oh, it's you again. Sorry, I shouldn't have done that. That's bad. I just feel so powerful. I can point to anything with this, and I'm going to put it down before I injure somebody. Yeah.
So, a more serious question. You've worked across different industry, from gaming to governmental stuff to probably enterprise stuff.
Yeah.
You already indicated that gaming might be a little worse than the others
Yes.
in terms of handling security, but
Yes.
when it comes to the disclosure, like when you go to them privately and disclose something
Yes.
to them, do you feel that their response is equally good or bad compared to other industries?
So the thing about gaming, and I just want to make clear this point, because I've already made it, but I want to double down on it, is gaming isn't terribly worse than almost everything else. It's just that compared to a lot of other technical disciplines, gaming has a disproportionate effect, right? Like a lot of people go on Google. A lot of people, I don't know, use a petrol station. And I'm sure there's loads of vulnerabilities. Wait, do you call it a gas station here? It's in German anyway. Okay, a lot of people buy the liquid that they put in their car at a place. And I'm sure that place has a lot of vulnerabilities in it too. But the thing is that video games are things that actually go on your system and have control over your system. And I think the video game industry makes more money than the film industry now, right? And yet the video game industry hasn't reached anywhere near the level of maturity that, say, Google or Yahoo even, or Facebook have as far as security is concerned. That didn't answer your question, did it? What was the end of the question?
The response to disclosures, like is the
response to disclosures. Yes, sorry. Yeah, I'm just trying to brain here. I'm very jet lagged. I don't know if anybody could tell, but I just flew across the Atlantic Ocean. God, it's very far. Yeah, as far as disclosure is concerned, it's actually really good. But not really good in a sense that is really good for security, but really good in the sense that people are very nice. People will say thanks a lot, and they'll try and fix the thing really super fast and probably take everything down in the process. But as far as like the kind of responsible disclosure that you normally expect, and that's something I want to Google later, it's the process of reporting a vulnerability and having it fixed, it's pretty lacking. Like, I reported that vulnerability in PUBG, but there was no follow-up, right? Like, I sent email to him and I said, okay, so you put this fix in, but you can bypass this fix really easily. And you put this fix in, but it doesn't work completely. And what happened was the email bounced because he changed his email. Which is why like standard security emails I think are really important for anything. Just because like if somebody's going to offer you free security information, I think you should probably take it. Any other questions?
We have one from Twitch.
One from Twitch.
How do I create GDDG18? How do I create a secure high score list online? How can I verify trust that the user submitted scores are legitimate?
How do I make a what? Sorry?
How do I create a secure high score list online?
High score list. Oh, that's a great question. I don't know if I took it out the slide because it was too rude, but on my hack list I originally had like a bullet point that was every single Facebook game that your grandma plays, because this is like a fundamental problem with video games, right? Like you play this video game, everything including your score exists in the video game, and then at some point it's got to say to the server, hey, I scored 10,000 points, and guess what? I can stop the packets going through and I can change the 10,000 to 10 million, and then everybody thinks I'm the coolest kid at school. That actually happened back in like 2012 when I was at school. It was great. It was Robot Unicorn Attack if anybody played that game. So how do you create a secure high scores board? This is a really interesting question about the fundamental dynamics of securing video games, which I think is a very different space to a lot of things. Like with web applications and some games, you can make it so that all of the state, all of the secrets, all of the important stuff is stored up in the cloud, which is actually somebody's computer somewhere. And that way somebody can't go in and change it. Like think about this, for example. I mentioned Dota before. Can I have a show of hands? Have anybody played Dota? Okay, some people played Dota, thank God. Because I have a lot of references to Dota. In Dota, it's like a 6v6 game, there's players on a map, and Dota is extraordinarily difficult to hack. And the reason for that is because the state of the game is not actually stored on the client, it's only replicated on the game client. In fact, the actual state of the video game is all stored up in Valve servers in the cloud. So you can't say something like, where is a player that I can't see? Because the server just doesn't send you their location. You can't say another player move 10 meters because you're only allowed to deal with your own thing. So as far as high scores board goes, it very much depends on the game. If you can have a game that's like a multiplayer game where the server is the source of all the truth and the server knows where everything is, then it's very, very difficult to tamper with. But if you're just making like a game where individual people play that game on their computer and submit to high scores, then you can't deal with it that cleanly. And that comes into the space where you see things like the obfuscation on League of Legends, which is an article I recommend anybody who's interested in this read. And League of Legends, games like League of Legends deal in an interesting space because there are advantages you can get in the game by knowing things that are already in the program's memory, even if you don't send the whole program. Like you can know your own spell cooldowns and stuff like that. And that is something that fundamentally exists in the computer. So from a standard information security perspective, you'd be like, well, that's it. They have access to it. You can't prevent them having that access. But you can do some form of obfuscation, which means that the actual code that's in the memory, the values that are stored in the memory are confused, and the program knows how to unroll that. And that comes to a level where you're just kind of throwing complexity at the wall and hoping somebody doesn't dig deep enough in the wall to be able to like actually mess with your game. So to wrap up, the answer is if you can have the game state in a place where you can control, that's great. Then nobody can mess with your high scores. If you can't do that, then you have to you have to make it hard for people to understand how to sub in a high score. And additionally, just look for really obvious things like, has this one IP address made 1,000 requests to change the high score in the last thing? Is that high score larger than can feasibly be reached in the game? Stuff like that. Hope that was relatively useful to the person who's not in this room. Any other questions from real life or Twitch or what?
Yeah.
Hello? Oh, there's
I have
somebody
this
on there.
question.
Hi.
How often do you get sued by companies when you show them a weakness, and do you have a legal advice, or did you need it?
This is a really good question. A lot of people are very scared about this. I've hacked a lot of things and I've never been sued. But I think that comes from just a skill that I had to build over time, which is being very nice over the internet. And I just like send someone an email and I'm very clear that, you know, I have no intention to exploit this vulnerability. I don't want to do you any harm. I just want to get this thing fixed. And people usually respond very well to that. But the thing that I will say is don't do crimes, right? Don't go into someone else's server and steal personally identifiable information to be able to prove that you can do it. Just say, hey, I think here's a thing I probably could do, which I haven't tried. And that's I think that's pretty sound as far as the legalities go. I don't know anything about law because I feel like if I don't know about law, then it can't hurt me. But no, I've never been sued. And I think that if you try and be really nice, most of the time you won't be. I'm not an expert on security law by any means.
There's one more question on Twitch.
One more question on Twitch, okay.
Psycho King would be interested in reading recommendations on
Recommendations.
this topic.
Oh, reading recommendations in books? So, information security is really hard to read about. There are classic books that people have written called things like the Browser Security Bible and stuff like that. But to be honest, I haven't read any of the books. There's a great resource. Sorry, I'm going to put my phone on silent so you don't hear that. There's a great resource called the OWASP, the Open Web Application Security Project, and it's the only thing of its kind, which is the people who build web applications went, all right, we're going to try and pull all our knowledge into one place where you can read it. And for the most part, it's out of date. But for the most part, it's also not completely wrong. So it's a great resource to be able to start and think about the way that systems get manipulated by code beyond these examples. You'll be able to find like hundreds of different kinds of vulnerabilities and the ways that you can exploit them within web applications. And beyond that, as far as security reading is concerned, I think Bruce Schneer's Cryptography Engineering is a good book on that. I don't know whether it's such a great or interesting book on actually cryptography engineering itself, but it has a really great few opening chapters on the principles of information security and what it means to build a secure system. I went over it a little bit when I talked about threat modeling, but he comes up with this great metaphor that I throw around all the time, which is safe door intent, right? You see somebody implement like 2 billion bit RSA, military grade, they say, encryption on their website, and yet the website itself is just like, I don't know, something that a 15-year-old can hack because they don't know anything about websites. All they know about is encryption and SSL. So, yes, read OWASP, and maybe that book that I recommended. It's amazing I managed to think of a book. I'm so happy. I think that there's no experience in security that's going to teach you more than actually breaking real applications. And obviously a lot of the websites you think of are going to have big security teams, going to be really hard to hack. But if you think of like your friend's website that they made for, I don't know, high school or something, it's going to have vulnerabilities in it. And you're going to be able to find those vulnerabilities using typical documented means that people have. As far as reverse engineering on games, there are lots of books on reverse engineering, but I recommend that people read the kind of disclosures that I did see on the UK tax system that talk about like how they did the thing, the thinking they went through, and then just go and do it yourself, and you'll learn way more than you can find in a book. Was there one other question from the back?
Hi.
Hey.
I just wanted to ask, what was the, personally for you, the most fun thing you managed to do?
This is a really good question. There's actually a question I asked to people in an interview when they apply to work on the security team. Because it's great. You get to hear about all sorts of great things that people have. The most fun thing that I ever did. I think that the first time is always the best. I think one of the most fun things that I ever did was like one of the first vulnerabilities I had, which is in one of my friend's gaming websites, and I replaced the entire page with a music video for You Spin Me Right Round, and then the page would just keep spinning, and you couldn't use the website anymore. That was just like, it was like so much fun. There were people who were annoyed at me, there were people who were laughing. I had permission to do the whole thing, by the way, legal things. And yeah, that was really, really great. I'm sure there is another one, but it's just not coming to me right now. I don't know, it could be a good question, but it's a really enjoyable question for me personally. All right. Is that it?
Is there still a question in the audience? There's one left in Twitch, what I see. Xenon Products is interested in what do you think about DRM protection, also in terms of ethics?
Ooh, okay. DRM is an interesting one because DRM is like often legally mandated as part of a contract. So like, you know, Amazon, probably shouldn't say Amazon since I'm an employee of Amazon, but Netflix, for example, has contracts with the people that they show films for, and those contracts say, you have to serve this over a certain type of DRM, you have to protect this in a certain way. And it's kind of immaterial in some sense, because like, if you think about it, Netflix DRM is interesting in the sense that it tries to restrict the people who could watch it to a certain number of people, and that number of people is everybody who uses Netflix, which is a lot of people. So by and large, I think that DRM is kind of folly when it comes to security, in the sense that like, it tries to do something that is outside of the realm of what I'd consider normal security practice, which is not like protecting yourself or protecting a system. It's like, when I give somebody a piece of information, I hand it over to them, I want it to continue to be protected in some respect. And that's like a forlorn hope. As I mentioned with obfuscation, anything that you send to a user who uses a video game or whatever system, is something that they can eventually get into. So yes, I don't think it's a good principle as far as security engineering is concerned, but a lot of the time it's done for legal reasons rather than like reasons of security, I think.
Okay, I think it's time to wrap up. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you so much.
It was a fantastic talk
Thanks.
and a wonderful Q&A session. Let's thank Thomas for this, also coming all the way from the UK to be here.
I have a Twitter account. It won't have anything you like on it, but it's my only way of keeping in touch with people because it's the only thing I really use. If you're just too worried to put up your hand, you can ask me in person or you can send me a message online and I will respond to it. Oh, one last thing. I'm sorry. I'm probably completely out of time. If you're building something and you have a security question and you can fit that in an email or a Twitter DM, I will absolutely answer it. Like completely free, no consulting or anything. I just love to help make the world more secure and help people know about security. Sorry, I sort of shoved a couple of more words in at the end. Thanks so much.